Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I don't want to talk about a specific book that I read, but rather because it is the end of May and the beginning of June, I want to do the usual wrap-up and TBR. In May, there were a lot of very good reads, a lot of things that stood out and made it a very fun month to read and to experience new things. The book Yolk in particular stood out, and I think it's something I'm going to be thinking about for a while, and I'll talk more about that when I do the wrap-up, but it's definitely a best of the month contender, and it's a year-end contender, best of the year contender. And other books fell pretty similar to that. There were some ones that weren't that great, but for the most part, I enjoyed the month of May. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in June. But there is something interesting happening in June in that I am going on vacation to Toronto, Canada. I'm leaving the country for the first time, and although some people say Canada isn't really leaving the country, it's just an experiment, like a test to see how well I can handle not being in America, even if it is like right next door. Sort of set dressing for if I want to go to Ireland or other countries down the road. So there will probably be less reading being done in June because I'll be elsewhere. I won't have time for reading. Fun to take a little break. I'm taking like an entire week off, but I'm only going like on vacation for 3 days. So like those other 2 days, I think like I won't be reading because it'll just be like a vacation from doing what I normally do. But I very much looking forward to, reading before and even after the trip. So that'll be quite fun. But yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the wrap-up and TBR, and we'll move on from there. So what happened in the month of May? In terms of movies, because I do a movie challenge with Lucas from Strike the Sun MD. I believe we talked about the movie Ben-Hur, which was really good. Go check out the video that we made about it. It's quite long because it is a very long movie, but it was a very, very good and interesting movie. Charlton Heston does some great acting. The sort of exploration of themes is really good, but the ending is kind of weird because it gets a bit overt. Like it kind of hits you on the head over and over with what it's trying to say there. So not as ideal, but it's still a movie that's worth seeing, and it looks incredibly well too. So I think if you're someone who likes watching old movies but doesn't like the look of old movies, which that's a weird thing to not like, but I can understand it. It doesn't look as old as you might think that it would. So in terms of books, I did read A Crack in the Line by Michael Lawrence. I thought it was very boring, kind of wasted its potential. It's a book about like alternative universes, like the multiverse, where like a young boy discovers that there's another universe where his mother didn't die. And there's a lot of things that could be explored there, but I don't think Michael Lawrence wants to do any of that. Instead, he just wastes his time setting up for another book, and it doesn't really work for me. It just comes off as very boring and not worth anyone's time. I also read Jamila Green Ruins Everything, which I thought was a lot of fun. Very interesting sort of exploration of it's satire, but it's focusing on like being accused of terrorism and sort of where that kind of originates and how the United States might have created its own problems in the first place. It's certainly not like too standout, but it's a fun satire, and it was enjoyable to read. And then I also read Happy by Grant Morrison, which I thought was just okay. It does try to come off as a bit too edgy at times, like it's trying too hard to be like in your face and edgy, but I think it's much more tamer than the other things that Grant Morrison has written. And I've noted before that I have a problem with Morrison's writing. I don't know, they just seem adverse to like exploring deeper themes, which is weird because Grant Morrison wrote Arkham Asylum, A Terrible House on a Terrible Earth, or A Serious House on a Serious Earth. And that's one of the best Batman comics I think that are out there. But ever since then I haven't been able to find anything like that from Grant Morrison, which is weird. Everything else just feels too, I don't know, commercial, too drab, not as willing, or they're not as willing to like explore Batman or anything else that they touch upon in depth, which is weird. And that's why Happy isn't probably going to be something that I think about as much as other comics that I've read. I read another comic called Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong by Prudence Shen. It was a story about a teenager who, after a breakup, is forced to run for student body president at their school, and is also dealing with some family struggles at home. Very interesting, and I wanted to talk about it on the channel, but it didn't really feel like there was too much meat to pick at there. So it's a good comic book graphic novel, but it's certainly not as deep as it could have been there. And that is probably me comparing it to the next thing that I read, which is Berserk Volume 9, which was amazing. Very interesting sort of exploration of what happens after Guts leaves the Band of the Hawk, as well as the sort of feelings of the feelings of pressure and stress that Casca is dealing with, and also examining where Guts started out versus where he has ended up, at least at this point in his life. Miura's doing a really good job in exploring these characters in much more depth than I had originally thought he was going to when I first started the series. It's a series that kind of like takes you by surprise because it starts out with Guts killing people and laughing about it, and you think that's all it's going to be about. But no, it's actually a lot more. And so I'm very much happy with where the series is going. I have volume 10, so I'm just waiting for an opportunity to read it, which will probably be very soon. I also read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, which I thought was good. Very interesting exploration of race, indigenous discrimination, and white culture versus indigenous culture, especially as it pertains to resources. Like my favorite aspect of the story is just noting how the reservation didn't have a lot of money and resources, but this school that was like 15 minutes away had a lot of resources and was able to challenge the students, and everyone got lunch and whatnot. And it was something that the indigenous reservation didn't really have. Now, why is that the case? These places are very close together, but why does one get more resources than the other? That especially stands out, but there's other interesting aspects of the story, including the discussion of basketball and its importance to the main character. I do think this is worth pursuing, and of course it is a banned book, so there's a lot to talk about with that, which I mentioned in the video that I made, so go be sure to check that out when you get the chance. I also read Man and Superman by George Bernard Shaw, which I thought was nonsense. It seemed more philosophical than really aimed at telling an actual story. Like the characters were just like props to, for Shaw to kind of, talk about his philosophy rather than actually using those characters to create lively people who have lived experiences. I'm certain some people like this, but I was not one of them. There are probably a lot more quality Shaw plays out there. And then I also read Yolk, as I mentioned before, by Mary H.K. Choi, which I thought was great, probably the best of the month. A lot of interesting sort of discussion of mental health, wanting to be seen, but also not wanting the peril of people seeing your flaws, and the path of self-destruction, among many other things. Very, very fascinating. It does have a bit of a cynical nature, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's part of the joy of talking about the book and noting why you don't agree with that sort of thing. So I'm probably not doing it justice. I recommend you go check out the video that I made, or just watch, or just go out and find the book yourself. I mean, it's definitely worth reading there. And then I guess I also read Dune Messiah, which the videos should be coming out already, or should be coming out soon at the time that I'm talking. Pretty excellent book, but it's not as good as the first one. But then again, like I doubt many things would reach the levels of the first book. But it doesn't do a great job of exploring what he started, Frank Herbert, what he started with the first book, and really showing how Paul is kind of doomed, and how he's moving the goalpost and his power has become corrupted. A lot of interesting aspects of that story there, and I can understand how it might have disappointed some people, but there's no other outcome for Paul. He was always destined to sort of fail in his effort to go along a solid path and prevent galactic jihad. I also read a number of short stories for the month of May, including Edward Mills and George Benton by Mark Twain. I thought it was intriguing, and the cynical nature of it was fascinating. Mark Twain is really good at writing cynicism, because I don't think he really liked his fellow man at times. I think he saw a lot of weird things in the world that he had to call attention to. But he was also, a weird individual, a racist individual, I would say, based on some of the themes and ideas that come up in his stories, unfortunately. And then I also read a Descent into the Maelstrom, a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. It was a lot of fun. It's certainly not as great as some of Poe's other short stories, but still one that is worth checking out. The Lion and Panther in London by Tanya James, which I thought was good, fun exploration of wrestling as well as race at the turn of the 1900s when, there's a bit of colonialism going around. That was a big part of the story. And then The Garden of Time, which I thought was a decent short story. It was the theme of the Met Gala ball, and in the video I talked about how that didn't really make a lot of sense because of the themes that were going on in the story. And so either they picked it without realizing what the story was about, or they misunderstood the story, or somebody knew what the story was about and they were trying to make the very rich celebrities look bad. It could have been any one of those things, but it's still a good story that's worth checking out. And you can find it online because it grew in popularity as a result of the Met Gala this year. I also read a number of poems which you can find on my Poetry Thursday playlist. Some of those poems were LGBT poems, and one of them was about a robot. The LGBT poems have to do with the period of Pride, where I'm talking about LGBT poets. So it should be a really thrilling month or two where I do that. And if you have any recommendations for high-quality LGBTQA poets, let me know in the comments below. But what do I plan on reading for the month of June for my TBR? As I mentioned, I'm going on vacation, so I probably won't get to all of this, but I will try to get to it in July if I don't get into it in June. I checked out a book from the library called The Very Nice Box about a woman who works at a company where she develops a friendship with our boss, but that man quickly reveals himself to be something else. I don't really know. I only read the back cover of it. It was a random selection from my library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. I also want to get to Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. This was on my 2024 TBR, and I'm really just eager to get back into John Williams because I really liked Stoner. I consider it one of the best books I've ever read. And Augustus was also good, but it wasn't nearly as good as Stoner. But I do want to check out what John Williams is doing with a bit of a Western story there. I want to get to some library reads that I'm picking up for my library. I also want to read Vagabond. I actually bought this on Amazon at the request of my friend Luna, who is a member of the Discord channel that I have, Discord server. There's a link to it in the description if you are interested in joining. I'm sure Luna would love to know more about you, but she recommended it because it had similar to themes to Berserk, and I was interested in seeing more manga there. I've actually started reading it, and I enjoy it, although it doesn't seem really that deep, and in fact it seems more like a straightforward kind of heroic masculinity kind of portrayal, rather than doing what Miura did and exploring further. But I haven't made it that far, so I can't really say that quite yet, but I just wanted to get that out there. So if I started saying that in my ultimate review, it'd be like, oh, Mr. Nothing, we saw this coming. He let us know ahead of time. But I'm still looking forward to reading more manga because I've only been reading either Spy Family or Berserk, and I really need to branch out. And I think I found another one through this author of Vagabond because they've written some other unusual manga that I think would be worth exploring. I also have a number of books from Bevan that she mailed to me before she moved to India. I need to start getting into those, and I should be doing that in June or July. I probably won't make it through all of them because they did give me quite a few books. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they gave me. I picked them out, so it's not really a surprise. But I haven't read any of the books, so looking forward to that. And then I also want to read A Bond Undone, which is the second book in the Legend of the Condor Heroes series. The Legend of the Condor Heroes was originally just one book in Chinese, but when they adapted it to the American language, they split it up into 4 different books. So I want to read the second one in the series, which Lucas, again from Strike the Sun MD, he recommended the first one, and I love the first one. So we'll see what happens in the second one. But if it's anything like the first, I'm going to be blown away by that. I have a number of short stories planned for June, including short stories by Patricia Highsmith. I had someone recommend a bunch of short story writers, but one person said that Patricia Highsmith was annoying, and I think that's what drew me to them because I wanted to read a weird, out of place, maybe a little bit annoying author, because we shouldn't just read stuff we love. We should also explore a little bit of the bad literature. I don't know if that's good advice, really, but let's explore everything, even if it is bad. And then another short story by John Chu. I can't remember what short story I picked from them, but it should be interesting. It's been a couple days since I picked their name out of a hat or something like that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I do have poems planned, the period of Pride, which goes from May, June, July, these are all LGBTQA poets, and again, if you have any recommendations, let me know in the comments below. Anyway, that was the wrap-up and TBR for the month of May and June. A lot of high-quality reads that we got out in May, and some good reads to look forward to in June, and maybe also July. If you have any recommendations, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear what you have to recommend. And I always like recommendations because it's something that someone just tosses at you, and especially if I don't know anything about it beforehand, it might be an interesting story, or at least a fun experience, regardless of whether it's good or bad. Let me know about recommendations or just comment on what I have listed out here. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about these books or even my channel. Get that word out there. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and June-based travels. Farewell.